So we're going to talk about how to raise major gifts in 4 simple steps. I might mention some virtually and in person because, of course, we're in a pandemic, hopefully coming out of a pandemic. And we're going to really talk about how to engage donors and how to ask them for gifts so that you can raise more major gifts. If you want to reach me, I'm at amyeisenstein.com and capitalcampaigntoolkit.com. So first, I thought I'd ask, I want you to open up your Q&A box so we can make this a little bit interactive. And of course, you can put your questions in there, but I'm going to use it also a little bit as a conversational tool as well, if you don't mind. So open up your Q&A box and let me know what is preventing you from raising major gifts, either now or during COVID, prior to COVID, right now. What is preventing you? What's stopping you? What's getting in the way of you raising major gifts? So let's see in the Q&A box, or you can use the chat box, but I think it'll just come to me, which is fine. What do you think? All right, Kathy's saying no dedicated marketing or fundraising employee. Yeah, so nobody to do the work, right? Okay, Laura, thank you for being honest. You hate asking. It is scary. It's probably not why you got into this line of work. You wanted to help people. So asking for money maybe wasn't what you signed up for. Anything else preventing people from raising major gifts? Not sure where to start finding donors. Somebody's saying that anonymously. Thank you. We will address that today for sure. And Tiffany says trying to determine or understand how COVID has impacted an individual's financials or not. All right, good. Derek, I'm new to the organization and I don't have the built-in community connections. Okay. Thank you for sharing that. And Becky, the hardest thing to reach out to companies when we know they're coming out of a hard time also, and no marketing. All right, great. Well, thank you all for sharing that. I appreciate it. Oh, we've got more. Sorry, I didn't scroll down. Figuring out prospective donors, don't know who to ask. Vacancy and development director, not feeling confident in who to ask. Okay, so we've got lots of reasons that we're preventing from major gifts. And, listen, we all have reasons that we're not raising major gifts, but the bottom line is if you want to raise money, we're going to have to get past some of those roadblocks, some of our fear, some of our, what we're going to address today primarily is lack of knowledge about who and why and when and how. So hopefully we'll be able to do that. But really it really is just an excuse. You have to go out and do it. And we're going to talk about specifically how to do that. So there's a prevalent fundraising myth that everybody gives the same amount. So your board members may believe that everybody gives the same amount. So that if you want to raise, let's say $100,000, all you need to do is find 100 people to give $1,000 each. And the math makes sense, right? If you want to raise $100,000, you need 100 donors at $1,000 each. But that's not the way fundraising works. And it's definitely not the way major gifts work. So whether you believe that or your board members believe that, I want you to sort of dispel you from that myth that everybody's going to give the same amount. It's simply not true. So let's look at how fundraising does work. It really follows something you've probably heard of called the 80-20 rule or the Pareto principle, and that 20% of your donors are likely to give 80% of your dollars. So if you want to really raise money, you've got to focus on the 20% of people who are likely to give 80 or sometimes even 90% of your fundraising results. Now, that doesn't mean you shouldn't be doing any direct mail or events or other things. There's a time and a place in fundraising for that. But today we're going to focus on the very few people who can give you the biggest gifts. That's what we're going to talk about today. So here's a gift table, for $100,000. And I just mentioned, right? And we talked about needing potentially 100 people if everybody was going to give us $1,000. And you know, from your fundraising, it's actually really hard to find 100 people to give you $1,000 each. It's a giant task. So let's see if we can do it with less donors here. So to me, when I'm thinking about raising 100,000, or, you can add any amount of zeros to this, it all works the same. So whether you're raising $1 million or $10 million or $100 million, I know it sounds crazy to say, but truthfully, it's just zeros. So the first gift should be 20% of the goal. So if you want to raise $100,000 or $1 million, you need one gift of $20,000 or $200,000, 20% of your goal. So what we would say in major gift fundraising is, do we know 2 or 3 people that we can ask realistically for a gift of that size, who can financially make it and might make it? Excuse me, I'm sorry, I have a frog in my throat. So then if you look here, we've got 12 donors. The first 12 donors have gotten us to 70% of our goal. So I just want you to really think about how fundraising works so that you're focused on the right people. So in my example here, we've got, 40, 50 people getting us to $100,000 instead of 100 people in the first example. All right, so I'm curious at your organization right now. Let me know in the chat box or the Q&A box, it doesn't matter. How big is a major gift at your organization? What do you consider a major gift? So you can just put A, B, C, or D. Under 1,000, B is 1,000 to 5,000, 5,000 to 10,000. And these are gifts that you get on a somewhat regular basis. Oh, good. We've got lots of C's and D's. All right, good. So you're getting gifts of this size: 5,000, 10,000, 25,000, 100,000. All right, excellent. You guys are good, entrenched major gift fundraisers. Maybe when I explained it a little more, we had some come in at 1,000 to 5,000. The average gift size for, I shouldn't say the average major gift that is considered a major gift by nonprofits in this country is just $5,000. So the reason it's important to know what a major gift is, there's lots of reasons, but one is to really know how to use your time, right? Does it make sense for you to go sit down for coffee with someone and ask for $100? Probably not. Does it make sense for you to go ask for $1,000? If you're saying yes, that does. It makes a big difference at our organization. We don't get those gifts regularly in the mail. Then that might be a major gift for your organization. We also want to know for donor recognition purposes, right? What do we do for donors who give us $1,000? What do we do for donors who give us $10,000 or more? Okay. All right. So for the next 30 minutes or so, we're going to go through 4 steps of the fundraising cycle to really think about how do major gifts work? How do we solicit them? How do we identify them? So step 1 is donor identification. Who are we going to raise major gifts from? And some of you identified that as the primary issue of why you're not raising major gifts, because you don't know who to raise major gifts from. Step 2 is cultivation. That's the relationship building. And we're going to talk about how do you develop those relationships with donors who can give you those gifts of 10,000, 20,000, 100,000 or more. All right. And then step 3, of course, is solicitation. That's the actual ask, right? You can't raise money if you don't ask for gifts. And so we'll talk about how and when to ask for gifts. And then the final step in the stage in the cycle is stewardship. And that's the thank you and follow up after you've raised the gift. All right, let us start. We're going to dive in with step 1, of course, identifying prospective major gift donors. So really, you want to start with the people that are closest to your organization. So you're going to start in the middle, those people who are connected to your organization, boards, staff, clients. You're going to go slightly out to current donors, your largest and your loyal donors. Those are the people that you're going to ask for major gifts from. The next ring would be to donors and volunteers, right? And finally, community members. So this is to show you that a lot of people believe that major donors are somehow out there. They're out there somewhere, and we just need to find them. But really, the reality is that they're in here. You already know these people. They're part of your community. They're in your donor database. They are connected, hopefully, to your organization. They live and work in your community. So, I have clients up here. That's true for some of your organizations and not true for others, right? At a hospital, we have grateful patients, so they might be great potential donors. At a social service agency, a homeless shelter, clients are not going to be your major gift prospects. So I just wanted to note that. But really, we're going to your largest and your most loyal current donors to think about what else they could do. They're the most likely people to give even larger gifts. So we're going to start with those people. Then we're going to use a handy little acronym, ABC, to think about who are our best potential donors. So A is for access. Do you have access to them, right? So if anybody's sitting around your organization and says, how about Mackenzie Scott, right? And you're going to say, do we have access to her? No, we don't. Okay, she is not a good prospective major donor for our organization. B is belief in the mission, in the cause. And so do the people that you have access to also believe in the mission and the cause? And finally, C is for financial capacity. Do they have the financial capacity? Do we think they have the financial capacity to make the kind of gift that we're seeking? So we're going to look for all three things in potential donors. So I want you to print out a list of people who have given to you in the past 2 or 3 years, or longer, right? Your most loyal donors at any level. Somebody who's given you $20 a month for the past 5 years, they're a very loyal donor. Maybe they're only giving you $20 a year because you've never asked for more. Or you've never given a real compelling reason for them to give more. So all the people on your donor database and your current volunteers and your donors you have access to. They also believe in the cause. So we're going to start with the people on your list. And then the challenge is to figure out, do they have the financial capacity to potentially make a gift? And there's lots of ways to figure that out. Do they make larger gifts to other organizations in your community? What kind of gift giving history do they give to you and others in the community? What do they do for a living, right? What kind of lifestyle do they have? Those types of things. All right. So we're going to look at those ABC scorings and really figure out who are the best prospects. So those who score high on a 1 to 5 scale, with A and B, so that was access and belief. How close are they to the organization? Are they active volunteers? Are they longtime donors? Are they big donors, right? Are they really committed to the cause? How do we know? Let's discuss it with people on our committee. Those people who get 4s and 5s, they're going to be some of our best potential prospects. And do we believe that they have the capacity, the financial capacity to make big gifts? Those are going to be our best prospects. So we really want to think about who are the best potential donors and identifying a short list, 10, 20, no more than 50 people that you're going to really pay attention to take through this cycle of 4 steps to raise major gifts from this year. So that's how you're going to identify donors. The best potential major gift donors are already part of your community. They're already part of your network. And so really it's about figuring out who they are, cultivating them. So identifying them, that's step 1. cultivating them, building relationships so that you can ask them for bigger gifts. So that's what we're talking about today. So step 2 is cultivation. So I want us to really think about, what do you do to build relationships with donors at your organization? What does that look like? What does that mean? So again, open up your chat box, your Q&A box. Let me know, what do you do to cultivate donors? What do you do to build relationships? And what does it even mean to build a relationship between a donor and an organization? Because essentially that's what you're doing. All right. So Sarah says you have fundraisers, you educate potential donors. We start by bringing them in for a tour to see our team at work. I love it. Thank you, Taylor. That's great. Yeah. So how can you engage them? How can you get to both know them? What are their philanthropic passions and interests? And what can you do to educate them about your organization? But I think that the piece that nonprofit leaders often miss, one of the things that you're really good at is that you tell people about your organization. You tell them stories and facts and figures, but a crucial part of cultivation is getting to know them and what their interests are and why they would care to give more. And so let's talk about figuring out how to get to know them. Oh, good. Kelly, you beat me to it. You said ask them their story and why they give. That's such an important piece of the process, really trying to get to know them. So we're going to set up meetings for coffee, visit them at their homes, meet in a coffee shop, invite them to your organization, whatever's most convenient for them. Ask open-ended questions, right? And Kelly said exactly this. Why did you give in the first place? I don't want to ask somebody for a major gift until I know the answer to this. Why do they care about the organization? That's what it means, right? What motivated you to give? Why is this organization important enough for you to give to? And why do you continue to give, right? If you've been giving for 5 years or 10 years, nonprofits these days are having such a challenge with donor turnover and donor churn. So if you have a donor who's been giving for 5 or 10 years, that's really important information to know what motivates them. Finding out what interests you most about our organization so that when you ask them for a bigger gift, you can focus on sharing how you're doing in that particular area. What are your philanthropic priorities and why? So really focusing on asking, what motivates them? What would get them excited about a gift? Because fundraising is not about twisting arms or guilting people or begging for gifts. It's about inspiring and motivating. And, we want our donors to feel great when they give a gift. If I ask somebody for a gift and the next day they regret it, they're going to go tell their spouse, their partner, their colleagues, like, ugh, if Amy calls you, don't pick up the phone. She's just after money. I don't ever want my donors to feel that way. I want them to get up the next day and say, oh my gosh, I did the most amazing thing. I provided a scholarship. I helped a person. I helped clean the environment. I'm really protecting animals. Whatever the case may be, I want my donor to get up and tell their spouse, their partner, their colleagues, their friends, like, oh my gosh, you've got to get involved with this organization because they are doing amazing work. So I need to know some of these things, like what lights them up, what motivates them, before I can ask them for a gift. And how would you like to help, right? How do you want to be involved? How should we approach you? So these are some questions that you really want to think about asking and know the answers to, so that you can make an appropriate ask when you're asking for a major gift. I see some questions coming into the Q&A, so let me pause for a second. And feel free, if you have questions, I want this to be interactive. So somebody's asking, what's the role of the board in identifying potential donors capable of making a major gift? So I have to say, wouldn't it be great if all of our board members identified potential donors, especially donors who are going to make major gifts? What I think you'll get is, if you ask it in that way, is crickets, right? Board members say, I don't know anybody. I don't know anybody who can give big, unless they're really experienced and comfortable fundraisers. So generally, I start the board off with softer requests, like I want to engage the board members in helping with thanking. I want the board members involved with helping giving tours. I want the board members involved in helping identify lower level donors or their friends who might be interested in volunteering. The first time you ask somebody for a gift, they're not going to give a major gift. We start with lower level gifts and we build up. Donors like to test us. So most people aren't going to give you a major gift, certainly not a major gift from their perspective the first time you ask. So if you're asking your board members to identify potential donors for major gifts, you're barking up the wrong tree, because they don't want to, sort of sell their friends out, right? And it's a complicated relationship. So I think the better question is, how can you involve your board members in the fundraising process, in thanking, in cultivating, yes, in identifying potential donors, but softly and gently. It's a process that takes place over time with lots of education. All right. So somebody's asking, would you encourage a donor survey that addresses some of the questions before scheduling in-person meetings? I mean, you might do a short survey. I think, most people are not going to fill it out, and really you want to be targeted and strategic. So if you can sit down with people, start with 10 of your biggest donors, 10 of your most loyal donors, and sit down and have these conversations, ask them these questions. Sure, I like donor surveys, the idea of donor surveys, and for sure, you want to follow up with the people that fill it out. I wouldn't rely on that as my only strategy. It's one piece of a strategy. All right, let's keep going. I want to show you an example of a cultivation plan, right? How I would think about interacting with my 20 best donors over the course of the year. So I would create a cultivation plan, a relationship building plan for the 20 people I've identified as my best potential major gift donors. So if they need a tour in January, I might invite them for a tour. You'll see in the right-hand column, the responsible party changes from board member, development director, executive director. And the reason is that I want each donor to know and feel comfortable with multiple people at my organization. If they only have a connection with one board member or only with the executive director, and that person leaves, then that whole relationship is gone. And so I really want to think about, how can I engage potential donors or current donors with multiple people at our organization. So, you'll see in the activity column, this middle column here, there's a variety of exercises and activities that engage the people. So when you're sending a newsletter to these top 20 people, don't just send your newsletter, whether it's an email or a hard copy, add a personal note. At least once a year, you should be having a coffee meeting, right? To sit down and talk to the people and ask them these personal questions. If you're having a gala, put a note on the invitation. These are your VIPs. Invite them to volunteer. Make sure that you reach out by phone and by email. And of course, you're going to sit down in person or virtually over Zoom and have an ask meeting at least once a year. So, this ensures that you're reaching out and sort of touching donors multiple times a year and engaging them with your organization. So So step 1 is identifying the best prospective donors. Step 2 is cultivating them and building a relationship with them. And now we're ready to ask, right? But first, I want to stop for a minute and ask you, how frequently do you ask for major gifts in a one-on-one setting, right? A is less than 5 times a year right now, currently. How many times do you ask for a major gift from one person for a specific amount in a one-on-one setting? So let's see what you say. Okay, we've got some A's coming in. So far, we've just got A's. Okay, right now, A. We've got one B. Okay, thank you. Okay, so listen, you know right now why you're not raising major gifts, because you're not asking for them. So the way to raise major gifts is to sit down with someone face to face and ask for a specific gift for a specific purpose. Okay, so we've got a couple of B's, but mostly A's. But if you want to think about how to raise major gifts and really do it, you need to start talking to people and asking people in a one-on-one setting for specific gifts. And it's hard. I'm not going to say that it's easy, but I do want to argue that small amounts of time add up. So think about it. One call a work day. So how many of, let me know if you call donors every single day on the phone. Do you pick up the phone and call donors? You can call about anything. You can call to thank them for a gift. You can call them to invite them to volunteer. You can call to ask them questions. Advice you can call. You can call to invite them to an event. So how many people call donors every single day? Anybody? Let me know if anybody does. All right. But part of this is about engaging with donors. And so it doesn't have to be, you know, the 20 donors that we're talking about, but just think about it. Make a list. How can you call donors every single day? Just one or two, start with one. Donor face-to-face meetings, right? If you have 2 meetings a month, you're meeting face-to-face with 24 donors a year. So let's say you want to ask people for major gifts. You need to meet with them at least once prior to asking for a gift to engage them, to find out the answers to those critical questions. But really thinking about, you know, can you meet with a donor every single week or at least twice a month? 3 hours focused on this kind of thing is 150 hours per year. So start small. It really will add up. All right, so let's see. Okay. Case for support. So you want to answer some critical questions when you are asking for a gift. You need to be able to answer these questions in order to encourage your donors to consider a bigger gift. So you need to be able to articulate who you serve, right? What has changed over the last couple of years? Has anything in your mission or your programs or your services changed in the past 2 years? I want to make sure that you are able to articulate what you need, right? So too often I will interact with a fundraiser who says, you know, we need financial contributions. Okay, can you be more specific? What do you need? How much do you need? What do you need it for? I'll never forget being, you know, at a presentation and the development director gets up and says, we really need canned food and diapers, right? Diapers. I thought, that is not what they need. I know that they can buy diapers in bulk and canned food in bulk much more efficiently and effectively than people donating random things and diapers in the wrong sizes and the wrong shapes and whatever. So ask for what you need, be able to articulate what you need. What is the plan for the future and why is this important now? So this is, you know, all these questions you want to be able to answer verbally and in writing when it's appropriate and necessary. All right. So now it's time to get ready for an ask. I like to think about asking permission to ask. So something along the lines of, would it be okay if I shared some of our needs? Right? Oops, sorry. Would it be okay if I shared some of our needs? So people are sort of on board, ready to be asked. And then something like this. We would like to ask you to help one child stay safe after school by considering a gift of $5,000 to support our after school program. Right? So it's specific, it's tangible. You've asked for a specific dollar amount, $5,000 to support our after school program. You know, that's specific and yet unrestricted operating if you're an after school program. So I know everybody wants unrestricted operating. Sometimes it's easier to ask for it than others. Try and be as general as you can. The less restrictive it is, the better it is for your organization. But you still want to tell people what you're using it for. So first, you're asking for impact. So what's the impact? We're asking for you to help us keep one child safe after school, right? And what does that cost? It costs $5,000, and that would support our after school program. And then you sit back and be quiet, right? So do you have this kind of language? You don't need to use my words. I'm just giving you an example, but what kind of language do you want to use when you are asking for a gift? Okay. So before we get to stewardship, let me go back to the questions here. And if you have other questions, feel free to put them in. Somebody's asking, how does an organization's development personnel balance their time in cultivating major gifts with short-term fundraising activities and events? It's a really good question. So I will tell you that major gift fundraising is probably the only kind of fundraising and plan giving that are not deadline driven. Right? So you've got grant writing, obviously they have deadlines. Events, of course, they have deadlines. Even direct mail, if you're trying to get it out by Thanksgiving or Giving Tuesday or end of year, deadline, deadline, deadline. Well, you're right. Major Gift has no deadlines. There's no donor who's waiting at the other end of the phone for you to call. And so the question is how to prioritize this. Now, I look at my gift range chart, that gift table I showed you earlier. So if I have 3 people that I could potentially ask for gifts of $20,000, and I know that I'm writing grants for $2,000 or having an event that's going to net $5,000 or $10,000, well, then major gifts becomes a priority, right? I'm going to follow the money. And so if you have an event that is netting, I mean, maybe you're raising $20,000, but you have $10,000 worth of expenses and tons of time, personnel time to run that event. And so I would say, all right, we're going to net $10,000, but I have 3 or 5 donors that I can ask for more than $10,000. So why don't we not do the event this year and see if we can get 1 or more of those donors to give more than bigger gifts? And that's how I'm going to prioritize my time. All right, Derek, you're asking for a small nonprofit with 2 part-time staff members. It's difficult to do more than 2 or 3 direct asks per year. Your fundraiser is also a grant writer. You know, it's true. I would, yes. And your grant writer is not necessarily going to be your major gift asker. So the question is, can you engage board members? I would try and figure out who are the 3 board members who are potentially the best and most comfortable at asking for your organization. I don't want to engage the board members that are most reluctant and hesitant and honestly not good at it. I'll tell you a really quick story. I was once fundraising and this board member, he introduced the organization to a colleague and we were cultivating him. So the board member helped identify the person and helped cultivate. It came time to ask, and the board member wanted to ask his friend for $5,000. Well, I thought we should ask his friend for $25,000. I asked the board member, do you want to stay home during the ask? Would it be okay if I went by myself and didn't take you along? And I asked your friend for 25,000. And he was so relieved not to have to go. He was like, all right, I guess, you can ask for whatever you want. His friend gave 25,000, but if the board member had come with us, we would have only asked for 5 because that's where the board member's comfort level was. And so I want you to think about using board members in ways that they can be most helpful and most valuable. And so I would, with a small staff, say, all right, who's not the fundraising committee, but the major gift committee, right? So assign them each 2 or 3 people to cultivate and solicit this year. Who are they going to be good at soliciting? So use board members as very, very part-time staff members until you're able to grow and hire that first development director. Okay, so Derek says, how do you know who to phone? I don't like getting unsolicited phone calls. So listen, I think that you're going to have to get to know your donors and figure out the best way that they like or don't like to be communicated with. And there's no way to know unless you ask. So you can send an email, say, hi, you've been a generous donor I'm from such and such organization. And I was hoping to get 10 minutes of your time to ask you a few questions, right? If they don't respond, you might text them, you might call them and leave a message. And you can say, listen, I'm not asking for a gift at this time. I'm calling to thank you because you've been such a generous donor. Would you mind if I asked you a question or two? So, is that an unsolicited call? It's not. You are already a donor. So if you don't want to engage, you can tell people that, but we're in the business of helping people and growing our mission and raising money. And you can't do it without reaching out to people. Okay, the fourth and final step of the fundraising process is thanking people. It's following up after they've made a gift. And this is critical because this will inform how many gifts you get in the future and next year and how easy or hard it will be to go back to these same people. So there's really 2 components of thanking and following up. One is figuring out, does your donor feel thanked, right? So it's one thing to shoot off a form letter, right? A receipt. The donor doesn't feel thanked when you do that. That's just a receipt. That's a form letter. So what can you do to make sure that your biggest and best donors actually know that they've made a difference? So you've got to tell them in multiple ways by multiple people, right? So maybe a board member picks up the phone and says, listen, we couldn't do our work without you. This is what your gift means to us. Maybe the executive director writes a personal email. Maybe you send them a little something, a photograph or a picture by one of your clients or something. So how can you stand out and be different and make sure that they know the impact that they had so that they're significantly more likely to give again in the future? Okay. All right. So what we've gone through today, identifying donors, cultivating them, right? So when you identify them, I want you to start with a short list, a manageable list, 10 people, 20 people. When I see lists of 100 people or 200 people or 500 people, I know they're not going to make any progress with that kind of list. So really make a list that you think is manageable for you this year, 10 people or 20 people, and make cultivation plans for each of those people. Figuring out, when are you going to learn about them? When are you going to educate them? When are you going to engage them? And when are you going to ask them? That's what a cultivation plan. And then make a plan before the end of this year or within the next 12 months to ask them for a gift that's significantly bigger than they're giving right now. All right. We have one more question. We're looking for $5,000. If rather than asking one-time gift, what about asking for a recurring gift of $500 per month for the next year? Should recurring gifts be part of our strategy? Yes, absolutely. Monthly gifts are a critical piece of the fundraising puzzle. And the more people that you can be giving, ask for gifts monthly, the better it is. So if you say to somebody, listen, we're hoping that you would support our after school program with a gift of $5,000, would it be easier, more convenient for you to give a monthly gift of, $500, or I think that's, is it 6,000, whatever it is. Or you can just say to somebody who right now is giving $100 a year, say, listen, would you consider giving $20 a month, right? So if you have $100 donor and you get them to give $20 a month, you've more than doubled their gift. That's not an example of a major gift, but you know what I mean. So if you can get donors to give $100 a month, $200 a month, you'll start to grow that program. So the ultimate major gift program is a capital campaign. My company is the Capital Campaign Toolkit. So I just wanted to give you a free checklist if you want, if you're even considering a capital campaign or doing major gifts in a very serious way, you can visit the website to get a free checklist. All right, so let me wrap up with 5 reasons to ask. And then if you have any more questions, I'm happy to take them, but I'm going to hand it back over to Kara in a minute. All right, so what are your 5 reasons to ask? Number 1, you won't raise money if you don't ask. You need to be involved in asking. Some people actually have more money right now. I know the stock market's going down. I'm aware of that. But the reality is that anybody who's in what we call the donor class, right, who's invested in the stock market, who's able to give a gift of $10,000 or more, has money in the stock market. And it has gone up so much over the past few years that even the decreases, they have significantly more wealth than they had in the past. People are eager to help. So lots of people don't know how to help. And if it's your job to give them an opportunity to help, and then if they feel really good about it, they will help. If you're working for a nonprofit and your job is to fundraise, you're being negligent if you don't ask. You're not doing your job. So being blunt about it. And your organization needs funding right now. So I hope that you will take these steps to heart and make a list of donors and go out and ask for gifts. Listen, don't make assumptions about what your donors will do and won't do, or can do and can't do. I actually saw something at the very beginning of this session. Somebody raised that issue. You have no idea what they can do. You're not in their bank account. You're not in their head. You won't know unless you ask. So go ahead and don't make assumptions. Ask. Okay. Just one more way to keep in touch with me. If you want to take my Major Gifts Challenge, it's at amyeisenstein.com/challenge. You can sign up to get emails from me every week that is moving you through this process. All right, let me wrap up. We covered 1, identify prospects. 2 is build relationships in a strategic and thoughtful way. 3, of course, is ask. And 4 is express gratitude. That's the thank you and the follow-up. And this is my contact information. If you want to stay in touch with me or ask questions or sign up for free weekly stuff, you can do that at those 2 sites. I have one more question here. Somebody wants to know, how does an organization leverage their website and social media platforms? You know what? You need to have a great website, right? Every donor is going to visit your website first. The first stop at your organization is on your website. So you need to have a great website that tells a good story, that's clear, compelling, has an easy to use donate now page. That being said, Major Gifts is not about social media. It's not about bulk solicitation. It's about one-on-one. It's about face to face. And in the virtual world, I'm including this face to face, right? I'm sitting here in New Jersey, you're wherever you are. It's like you're in my office, right? So you can absolutely do that. But don't worry about social media for the purposes of major gift asking. It's about getting to know people individually and engaging them. Okay. One more question. Kara, do we have time for this one more question?
Yeah, we do.
Okay. Somebody's asking, how many interactions should you have with a potential donor before making an ask? There's no right number. Okay. So the people that you know well, like your board members, your active volunteers, you're going to need to sit down and have one conversation with them before you ask them for a major gift, because you already know them. They show up for board meetings, they volunteer, they're around. So one time. So somebody who, gives but never shows up for anything, you don't know them, you might have to have, more than one meeting, but don't drag it out. Ask them for a gift and listen. If they say no, say, okay, please, I wasn't really sure what to ask you for. Can you tell me more about what you were thinking? So start that conversation. You don't have to get it exactly right on the first time. And honestly, I worked with an executive director a few years ago, and she really was anxious about asking, right? She hated it. She didn't want to do it at all, but she knew that she needed funding for her organization. So she went and sat down with donors and said, listen, I want you to know that I would rather be almost anywhere than right now than here having a conversation about money, because I think it's so awkward and uncomfortable. So I just want to get that out there. But I also know that I have an obligation to this organization and to the kids we serve. And so I wouldn't be doing my job without asking you for money. So, I hope you'll excuse me as I bumble my way through this. I mean, she just put it out there, and I coached her to say that, say, listen, I'm not good at asking for money. I don't know if you're any good at being asked for money, but we both care about the kids. And I'm hoping that you'll be receptive to learning about our needs and ways you can help, because we can't do what we do without supporters like you. So I'm just going to tell you that, we need a gift of $5,000 in order to be able to do that. Is that something you'd consider? And so you just have to go out there and do it. And you can tell people, like, I'm not in this because I'm great at asking for money. I'm in this because I care about the environment, or because I want to find a cure for cancer, or because, the seniors in our community really need support. So just bring it back to the mission and you'll be okay. All right. I hope that was helpful. Good luck with your fundraising. I'd love to hear how it goes. And thank you for joining me today.